Welcome back. Glad to have you back again. We are ready to go ahead and tackle Chapter 2 in the Legal Environment of Business textbook. This is basically an introductory chapter to law and the legal environment of business itself. Business issues that are legal issues, that business owners find themselves up against from time to time. The chapter outline. We will be defining the legal environment of business. We will be defining law and jurisprudence. We'll be talking about different sources of law, where law comes from. We'll be talking about classifications of law and global dimensions of the legal environment of business. Obviously, with the internet, the world is a business place. It's just amazing how someone in Tucson, Arizona, if they wanted to, could do business with somebody in London, England, and never leave the comfort of their office. It is a world business place now. It's not a national business place or state business place or local business place. The world is a business place. So, for the legal environment of business, that is the study of legal reasoning, critical thinking skills, you're going to hear that a lot, ethical norms, and schools of ethical thought that interact with the law. It's also the legal process and present legal system, along with alternative dispute resolution systems. That's just a very fancy, intricate way of saying trying to settle differences without going through a court. Administrative law process and the role of business people. On top of statutes and case law, business people also have to be concerned with administrative regulations, which we will talk about later on. Selected areas of public and private law, consumer law, and environmental law. Most businesses have some sort of waste to dispose of that involves the environment and the international dimensions of the legal environment of law. The top 10 reasons, here we go, Letterman, the top 10 reasons for studying the legal environment of business. Becoming aware of the rules of doing business, what you need to know to establish a business, how to run a business, how to protect yourself legally, things of that nature. Familiarizing yourself with the legal limits on business freedom. You're not totally at liberty to do as you please. Forming an alertness to potential misconduct of competitors. Oh, interesting point. Appreciating the limits of entrepreneurship. You can't infringe upon the rights of your competitors or your customers. Being able to communicate with your lawyer. Knowing just enough about the law as it pertains to business that you can sit down and have a conversation with your attorney and not be hopelessly and totally confused. Maybe slightly confused, but not hopelessly and totally confused. Makes you a more fully informed citizen. Gives you a stronger sense of what is right and wrong. Developing an employment-related skill. Yes. Managerial people who can go to owners and say, hey, I'm no lawyer, but I can hold my own talking to an attorney. That's a big bonus. That's a big bonus for some businesses. Exploring the fascinating complexity of business decisions. It can be totally amazing what courts decide sometimes. Providing a heightened awareness of business ethics. Ethics. Doing the right thing. Being a good neighbor. A good member of your community. It's just the right thing to do. Opening your eyes to the excitement of law and business. The two go hand in hand. May not like that much, but unfortunately, even the smallest of businesses have to be aware of law-related business issues. Here are some schools of legal thought, known as jurisprudence. The natural law school, the source of law is absolute, nature, God, or reason. Positivist school, source of law is the sovereign, the end-all, the be-all. You can't cross it. You can't go against it. You can't change it. The sociological school, source of law is contemporary community opinion and customs, meaning law changes and evolves as we as a society change and evolve. The American realist school, source of law is actors in the legal system and scientific analysis of their actions. That's true. Lawyers have to be good actors many times in a court of law. And there is a science behind it as to why they act the way they do on occasion. Critical Legal Studies School. Source of law is a cluster of legal and non-legal beliefs that must be critiqued to bring about social and political change. Incorporating popular beliefs, norms of society along with the law. The feminist school reflects a male-dominated executive, legislative, and judicial system in which women's perspectives are ignored and women are victimized. That's a tough one. There are some areas of law where that still has a certain degree of truth to it, particularly when it comes to women who have been assaulted. Law and economic schools, a classical economic theory and empirical thought apply to all areas of law. Money makes the world go round, right? Absolutely. All right. We have several sources of law here in the United States. Probably the most familiar to us is the legislative branch. This would be Congress, or on the state level, your state legislature. They create laws. The judicial branch, the court system, both the federal system and each individual state court system. They interpret laws. But sometimes through their interpretation of laws, they create law themselves. Executive branch enforces laws. That's the president or the governor. However, these individuals also have some lawmaking ability of their own through the use of the veto, refusing to sign a bill into law. Executive orders, that's a big one. Administrative agencies. There are federal regulatory agencies that oversee just about every aspect of our daily lives. If you drank a diet soda today or had eggs for breakfast, the Food and Drug Administration dictates what may be in something that is called a diet soda and specifies what eggs have to be like in order to be sold to the public at large. Can't escape federal regulatory agencies. Where can you find these laws when you need to find out about them? Where do you go? Well, federal laws, legislative law, laws created by Congress, can be found in the United States Code, which is strictly a retelling of all the state laws, strictly a retelling of all the federal laws that are currently in existence, or preferably the United States Code annotated, because the annotated version of the United States Code is going to give you some bits of brief explanation behind the law, maybe reference you to some case law that addresses that statute that you can go look at. Gives you a bit more information than just the United States Code itself. On the state level for legislative law, it's the state code or state statutes. It depends on what that state calls them. Arizona calls them statutes. On the local level, municipal ordinances, city law, township law. Okay. For the executive branch, on the federal level, for the president, presidential proclamations and executive orders that he can issue. You've probably heard a lot about that since January. Our current president has made rather extensive use of executive orders. On the state level, same thing, only it's from the governor. Case law, also known as common law, can be found in several different reporting systems, depending upon the court that you are dealing with. Administrative regulations, those are found in the Code of Federal Regulations. States also have administrative codes and regulations as well, and so do municipalities. Oh, what fun as a business owner to make sure that you are keeping in line with all of these different sources of law. Fascinating. And make you tear your hair out too. Oh, how a bill becomes a law. Well, you get a member of the legislature, be it a senator or House of Representatives, to introduce the bill to the full House or to the full Senate. It is then referred to an appropriate committee, who then refers it to an appropriate subcommittee. And there endeth most bills. They, as we put it, die in committee. Most bills do not see their way clear out of a subcommittee. Those that do are reported back to the full committee. Then they move on to the House Rules Committee. They're debated and voted on the floor of either the House or Senate. And then the bill is sent over to the other legislative body, where it must go through the same process all over again. So when the House of Representatives actually, amazingly enough, passes a bill, they send it over to the Senate, where the thing has to go through the same process all over again. And just to make things even more interesting, if the Senate doesn't pass the House's bill in the exact form that it was given to them, word for word, the Senate decides they want to make changes, which they typically do, then that bill has to go to a joint House and Senate conference committee to see if the differences between the House version of a bill and the Senate version of that bill can be ironed out. If they can, great. Both the House and Senate vote on them. If they can't, usually dies right there again. So, the number of bills that are introduced into Congress, either through the House of Representatives or the Senate, in proportion to the number of bills that actually become law, is negligible at best. And you're looking at the reason why. It is just such an outrageous process to have to push a bill through in order to get it passed into law. I mentioned earlier that sometimes courts, judicial branch, create their own law in a funny sort of way. The judicial branch is comprised of the federal courts and or state courts, which are charged by their respective constitution. Federal courts, the United States Constitution. State courts, their relative state constitution. Interpreting the Constitution and statutory law on a case-by-case basis. Court decisions are published in what are known as reporters. It's just what they're called, reporters. Judicial review determines if a statute is constitutional. The United States Supreme Court and most state Supreme Courts have the power of judicial review. Judicial review is determining if a statute is constitutional or not. Either the United States Constitution for federal court or state constitution for state court. Case law precedents and the internet. Many decisions by state and federal appellate courts, courts of appeal, are posted to online databases. What does that mean? Well, it means that case decisions are published within a matter of hours after being decided. And lawyers are responsible for knowing about decisions that have come down within the last few hours that may have a bearing or impact on a case they are working on. And if they submit something to the court or appear before a judge and are not aware of that decision, even though it might have only come out 3 hours earlier, they have a problem. The judge is going to give them a problem. Okay. Restatements of law. These are scholarly compilations on various areas of law. They are treatises. They are the go-to 101, please explain to me what the heck this is type of publication. They do not have the force of law. They are not laws themselves. They are just very expanded, very detailed explanations on legal topics, like contract law, or agency law, or administrative law. They are good places to go to start if you don't understand what's going on. If you're in a contract dispute and you're confused, totally confused, go read some of the restatement on contracts. It'll give you a better working knowledge of how contract law works. And then maybe you can sit down and talk to your attorney and actually figure out what's going on. The executive branch is a source of law. This gets tricky. Executive branch is the president, president's staff, and the cabinet, or governor, if you're talking about state. Treaty making. The president has the power to make treaties that become the law of the land and supersede any state law. Whoa, impressive, powerful. Yeah. Still subject to the advice and consent of the Senate. Executive orders. Presidents make laws by issuing executive orders. These are also used by state governors to deal with emergency budget functions. Issue an executive order extending the deadline for budget submission. As I said earlier, our current president is making rather extensive use of executive orders. Now, groups and legislators can find objection to that, which has also been going on. And so these groups can go to court and say, this executive order is in violation of an existing law, or this executive order is in violation of this section of the Constitution. So it's not like the president can wave a magic wand, issue an executive order, and that's it, the end. They are subject to judicial scrutiny. Administrative agencies as a source of law. We'll talk about administrative law on another day, she says. They make rules governing the conduct of business and labor in certain areas. Here are some examples that really tie in with businesses. The Securities and Exchange Commission. Guess who oversees the stock market? Yeah. Federal Trade Commission. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Employment Discrimination. No, that's the EOC. OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Safety and health rules and regulations that business owners must follow to ensure the health and safety of their employees. This gets better and better, doesn't it? Okay. Excuse me. We can classify law in various ways. There are statutory laws, statutes, that are made by the legislative branch of government. There is case law as the result of judicial interpretations of constitutions and statutes. Here's a real easy example of that. It doesn't happen quite so much as it used to, but once in a while, court will be presented with an issue that it has never dealt with before. There's no existing law on it. At the dawn of the internet age, people started getting more and more brilliant ideas as to what they could do with the internet. And somebody came up with the idea of doing business over the internet. Even better, buying and selling stuff over, over the internet. Okay. How do you make purchases or sign contracts over the internet? You can't take your ink pen and write on the screen. Well, okay, let's put a little statement here on our web page. It says, by checking this box, I hereby attest to and agree that this is my electronic or digital signature, and I am abiding by the terms and conditions listed above. Voila. Check the box. You've now signed on. You've signed the contract. You've placed the order, whatever. Well, then along comes somebody else who says, wait a minute. That's not a signature. You clicked a box. You did not write your name. That issue got to court. And the court said, oh my, we have nothing to look at here. So when all else fails, courts look to intent. What was the purpose behind the action? And they decided that the intent or the purpose behind clicking that box was signing an agreement. And it was valid. But there was, at the dawn of the internet age, there was nothing out there that they could hang their hat on to go to. Say, oh, okay, here's this law. This is how we thought. No. They had to figure that out all by themselves. Judicial interpretation. There is criminal law, dealing with anything from wrongful conduct to fraud to murder. These are laws that are an affront to society as a whole. Okay? Civil law. These are laws that govern litigation or disputes between private parties. It is not an offense or an assault to the public as a whole. It is between two private parties. Okay? Public law deals with the relationship of government to individual citizens. Private law deals with the enforcement of private duties of citizens. Substantive law creates and regulates legal rights. What can you legally do or not do? Procedural law. This is a whole separate set of laws. Aside from criminal law or aside from civil law. These are laws that actually tell you what has to happen when you're in court. Right? What can be admitted as evidence? How it has to be admitted? What can and cannot occur during the course of a direct examination of a witness? What can or cannot occur during the cross-examination of a witness? Those are all procedural laws dealing with just what's going on in court. Cyber law applies to the traditional categories of law, but we're dealing with online communication, right? Conduct and behavior online. Okay, a comparison between civil law and criminal law. The parties involved. In civil law, it's usually individual or a corporate plaintiff versus an individual or a corporate defendant, right? Two private parties. In criminal law, it is the government on some level, county, city, state, or federal, prosecutor versus an individual or corporate defendant. What is the purpose behind civil law? Compensation, deference, or deterrence. Make them pay so they won't do this to someone else. I want my damages, and then I want them to pay extra so they will not do this again. That's known as punitive damages. The purpose behind criminal law? Well, several. Punishment, of course, because criminal laws deal with issues that are an affront to society as a whole. Deference or deterrence, if you spend some time in jail, maybe you won't do that again, now will you? Rehabilitation. All kinds of programs are offered in our prison system. High school GEDs, all the way through college degrees, counseling, drug rehab, you name it. What is the burden of proof that must be met for each kind of law? This is where there's a really big difference between civil law and criminal law. Criminal law, we've all heard this, we've all watched the cop and court shows on TV. Beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecution must prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. That means, in order to obtain a conviction, the jury must be as sure as humanly possible of their decision, or they cannot rightfully convict a defendant. Notice it says reasonable doubt. Let's face it, folks. If somebody commits a murder and there's no witnesses, no one really knows for sure what happened, but the two involved and one of them is gone. You hope forensics does its job in that case. The burden of proof to find for either the plaintiff or the defendant is much lower in civil law. It's only by a preponderance of the evidence. That's just a little tip of the scale, past level. That's like if you are 51% sure, that's the way you go. That's your verdict. This explains why, if you have ever heard of the O.J. Simpson case, this is why O.J. Simpson was found not guilty in a criminal court of law. He was found not guilty of murder. I didn't say innocent now, I said not guilty. There's a difference. But when the families of Nicole Brown and Ronald Goldman sued O.J. Simpson in civil court for the wrongful death of their family members, O.J. Simpson was found liable, responsible for their deaths. Why? Because the burden of proof was so much less in the civil case. Okay? Sanctions in civil law, it's typically monetary damages or maybe equitable terms. Contractor skips out on you halfway through the job. Hey man, I just want the job done. I don't want the money. I just want the job done. My house is half fixed. Criminal law, it's either going to be a fine or imprisonment. So those are the differences between the two types of legal systems we deal with in this country. Civil and criminal. The global dimensions of the legal environment of business. Trade treaties make international dimensions of the legal environment of business increasingly important to the United States. International dimensions of law that have an impact? Well, legal. There may be a business practice in the United States that's perfectly legal that might be illegal in another country in which that business is trying to conduct business with. Financial. How does the dollar stack up against the euro, the yen, the whatever? Economic. Same thing. Ethical variables. Some things that are perfectly acceptable here in this country when it comes to doing business that would be utterly offensive in other countries. You have to be aware of these things if you are doing business on a global scale. So we have covered the definition of the legal environment of business. Everything that is legally tied to operating a business. We have defined different types of law and jurisprudence, decision making, sources of law, statutes, case law, classifications of law, global dimensions of the legal environment of business. It's a big marketplace out there today, folks. So, here ends chapter 2. You have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you in chapter 3.